report, but we're going to start off with recognising the good work of the Reform Party. So let's just have a look at Reform's website. And of course, this is the key thing: become a member, join the UK's fastest growing political movement. And we just ask a question because is Farage pictured here with arms raised? Is he going to be the saviour? Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much to all the people that got out, who worked, and of course to take some 677 seats. That was a very good effort by the Reform Party, so credit where it's due. We have some questions to ask, and some of those questions may possibly ruffle some feathers, but we think this absolutely has to be done if the real issues taking place in UK are going to be dealt with. So let's just have a look at what's been reported in the press. So the Telegraph here: Tory council swept away by Reform surge. So a pretty powerful headline there. I'm going to say to the audience, does this represent opportunities? Does it represent threats? And I think there's a little bit of both, which we'll get into. But here was a bit from the Times. John Curtice: Reform's by-election win outstrips anything Ukip achieved. And I want to put a little caveat on that, because John Curtice talks about Farage being a political disruptor. And of course, he's talking in terms of Farage's activity amongst the bigger established parties, the Conservatives and Labour. But we also need to remember that Farage has disrupted his own party in the past, and he also abandoned it, what many Ukip people at the time thought was a critical point. So I'm going to remind the audience that I had an interview with Joe West a little while ago. He'd resigned from Reform UK. And in the dialogue, we had a very interesting chat about my experiences in UKIP going back quite a few years, and his experiences coming up to 2025 in Reform UK. Now, you can find that interview on the UK column website, Nigel Farage and the destructive Toryisation of Reform UK. But the key part of the discussion was this: we saw similarities between what happened with Farage in UKIP and what was happening in Reform in 2025. So we've got rousing speeches, we've got authoritarian control, where Farage is protected by a circle of appointees. We've got suppression of successful initiatives by party activists, and the end result is a party led into a cul-de-sac and ultimately a failure to achieve the political success its members are desperate to achieve. Now, I'm going to stress very strongly here that I recognise the immense good work of the Reform soldiers who got out, did the work, did the canvassing to get elected. They deserve the recognition for the really outstanding results they've achieved. I'm gently putting out a little bit of a warning that we saw exactly that situation with UKIP many years ago. And then what happened was that the leadership of the party failed to follow up on the success of the people who'd walked the streets and convinced voters to vote for them. So just think about that, and I'll be coming back onto this subject in just a moment. But the other thing that we've got happening in UK at the moment is a mixture of history and propaganda. And I picked up here from the Ministry of Defence Twitter, their X site. It says the Cenotaph stands draped in flags, just as it did on VE Day 1945. Today we pay tribute to the greatest generation whose courage secured the freedom and prosperity our armed forces protect today. Well, if we add a bit, there was another tweet, and it calmly announced that armed forces of Ukraine would be joining this VE Day parade. Now, a number of the UK column audience contacted me because they were the individuals were actually very, very upset about this because, of course, if we know our history, the overwhelming effort of Ukraine was to support the Nazis, and yet here they are to join our parade as if none of these things had taken place. But if the Ukrainians are one issue, then what happened was the Ministry of Defence went on to promote this lady, and no disrespect to her, Henny Frank's a Jewish refugee. She escaped from the Nazis, came to UK, worked as an army lorry driver, but she is given recognition. The Ukrainians are given recognition. It's almost as if the indigenous people of UK wiped off the Ministry of Defence map. Now, why should this be happening? This is where we need to get deeper into politics than I've seen Nigel Farage go in many years. And let's focus on the change agent that is Keir Starmer. And my suggestion to the audience today is that he is at his work destroying UK from inside. He claims to be securing Britain's future, but let's have a look at what's been happening. Well, of course, the first thing is this extraordinary 100-year pact with Ukraine, not voted on in Parliament, simply announced. Certainly to the public as a fait accompli. We have no idea what the background is of the Ukrainian politicians who've been drawn into this. Are they extreme right wing? We have no way of knowing. And alongside this, of course, we've got, admittedly started by the Conservatives, but we've got a memorandum of understanding drawing the UK and Israel closer together. And this is not only for trade and industry, of course, it's for intelligence services and the military. Again, the UK public simply not consulted in what was taking place. And now we see the final betrayal from Keir Starmer in particular, because as UK column has warned over many years, Brexit would be done without the exit. We would never fully leave the European Union. And we say today, we told you so, as now we get the mainstream media reports that Starmer is betraying UK by his backdoor deals with the EU, and that also includes this military grouping up. But of course, we shouldn't be surprised because Keir Starmer calmly announced to the BBC that between Westminster and Davos, he would choose Davos every time. And let's bring in over here the fact that Starmer has said that he's Prime Minister to achieve change in the UK. And our challenge to Nigel Farage is, when will you start talking about the real danger of Keir Starmer's subversive change to UK? So let's just bring this down. Will reform actually grip these real issues? We will wait to see. But of course, the Labour Party itself has stressed that it's there to change the UK. It doesn't want to tell us how, but it's constantly saying change and more change. And constant change is revolution. We're going to ask again, will reform grip these issues and talk about them in the frank way that UK column is doing so? And also, we want to know whether reform is going to grip the issue of people who are connected with the Fabians. And of course, Tony Blair as a Fabian master, that's my term, and Keir Starmer as the mere student are areas that, of course, we have many questions as to what is the power of this Fabian organisation and what are the changes that it wants for UK. Well, we can see as we look at the headlines today that immigration and migration absolutely to the fore. But as UK column has warned and warned, this immigration is not the tiny numbers coming in rubber boats. It is the thousands, some 600,000 Ukrainians last year alone, who are invited into the country by the government. They don't fight their way ashore. So these are people being invited into the country by our political masters, and the propaganda around relatively tiny numbers coming in the boats is simply the sideshow. So our challenge to Nigel Farage is again, will reform really grip these issues of migration and what the true figures are and which political individuals are driving it? Now, if we have a look at the headlines of the paper, I've just decided to choose a couple here. We're going to say, what will reform do in the media propaganda pond? So if you have a look at the Times, it's almost difficult to see their report on reform, but of course Times is attacking the Reform Party, fight off reform with higher taxes and spending, the Prime Minister is told. We've then got a big headline, EU blocks efforts to curb the flow of migrants. Now, remember, they're talking about rubber boats. They're not talking about the true statistics on massive migration of people invited into the country. And if I just bring the Telegraph up here, of course, we've got a mixture of fear, imminent suspected Iran terror raid foiled. Of course, we have absolutely no evidence to support that headline, but this is put in juxtaposition with the Beckhams. What relevance they have to UK, I've absolutely no idea. And then if you look at the very bottom of that article on the right, it says that Facebook is putting children's lives in danger, says security chiefs. And again, we're going to ask the key question, will reform grip these issues and talk about them properly? On that note, Ben, I think we'll bring you in. And of course, you've been warning for some considerable time about the powers of these non-government organisations that are clearly grooming and training our politicians to what we can only describe as the rules-based international system. What have you got for us today?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Diane. Hello, everybody. Like Plymouth Argyle losing to Leeds, I have been relegated today to Studio 2 by an ascendant Northern champion in the shape of Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy. So congratulations, Diane, for taking the top spot in the studio today. I should also just say that's the last time I'll ever do a football reference, by the way. So just putting it out there. And I'll also just like to say that was a fascinating opening segment, Brian. And I think what's particularly interesting is that we now no longer have a Conservative Party in this country, and reform is really just another way of saying change, isn't it? Anyway, moving on.